Welcome, everyone. My name is Laura Jane Kestner. I'm a member of LACBA's President's Advisory on Women in the Legal Profession, or PAC. And on behalf of the PAC Subcommittee on Gender Bias and Civility, I want to welcome everyone listening to the next installment of our oral history project on gender bias. The objective of this project is to record and preserve the personal stories of gender bias in the legal profession. As part of this project, we have invited prominent female attorneys and judges to share their experiences of being treated differently as a woman or witnessing gender inequity in their workplace or in a legal forum. The purpose of this project is to educate the legal field about the experiences of women attorneys and to share the insights of attorneys who have witnessed gender bias firsthand. In this vein, we will ask narrators to share how they successfully addressed or circumvented gender bias in their work and about what steps the legal field should take to combat gender inequity. Today is my honor to have an interview with prominent criminal defense attorney, Mia Frances Yamamoto. Mia was born in Poston Relocation Camp in Arizona. She graduated from Cal State University in Los Angeles with a bachelor degree in government. She served in the U.S. Army 4th Infantry Division and was awarded the National Defense Service Medal, Army Commendation Medal, Vietnam Campaign Medal, and Vietnam Service Medal. Ms. Yamamoto graduated from the UCLA School of Law and co-founded the Asian Pacific Islander Law Student Association. She has worked for the Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles, served as a deputy LA County public defender, and as a California State public defender. Ms. Yamamoto has been in private practice since 1984. Ms. Yamamoto has served as past president for the California Attorneys for Criminal Justice. She is co-founder and past chair of the Multicultural Bar Alliance, past president of the Japanese American Bar Association, and the Asian Pacific American Women Lawyers Alliance. She has served on the California Judicial Council state task forces on jury improvement and access to justice. She's co-founder of the Asian Pacific American Bar Association of Southern California and a founding board member of the International Bridges to Justice, a human rights group providing due process education and advocating against investigative torture for the judicial systems in China, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and Africa. She has previously served on the boards of the LA County Bar Association, Korean American Bar Association, the ACLU. She is a lifetime member of the Women Lawyers Association of Los Angeles, National Lawyers Guild, and Philippine American Bar Association. Among Ms. Yamamoto's many honors, she's been awarded as Criminal Defense Attorney of the Year by LACBA, named as 100 Most Influential Lawyers in California by the California Daily Journal. And she is a recipient of the Rainbow Key Award from the City of West Hollywood, the Harvey Milk Legacy Award, and the Liberty Award from Lambda Legal. She served on the ABA's Commission on Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity, and she was one of 3 recipients of the inaugural Stonewall Award from the American Bar Association. Welcome, Ms. Yamamoto. And if you could unmute yourself, please. Welcome, Ms. Yamamoto.
Most fundamental mistake I can make, I start with.
No worries.
Thanks for the introduction.
Thank you. So the first question I have for you is, what is the professional accomplishment of many that you have, of which you are the most proud?
You know, I was given some time to think about that, and I actually thought transitioning on the job. going from Mike Yamamoto to Mia Yamamoto, right there in the trial courts of Los Angeles Superior Court, I have to count that as a most significant achievement. It certainly did the most for me, and I see it now as a mandate for doing the same thing for others. It just seems to me. So yeah, I mean, it was not easy, and it was unusual. It had never been done before. So I look at that, and when I look back at it, because I thought I really didn't know what to say about that until I thought about it, and I thought, well, come on, anything was unique and worthy of reporting about. Whether or not it was any good, I don't know, but it was an attempt to make a difference with myself, certainly, and hopefully had some resonance further on. One of the things I learned about the process, one of the first talks I gave when I came back from Thailand after my surgery was talking about the transgender women that I met and all the other people going through that process. And I remember telling them I met a girl who had transitioned at 11 and and was there at 18 years old to actually go through the surgery, which she was seeking for those 70. But anyways, because she was on hormone blockers, she was indistinguishable from any other girl of that age. So that audience, LACBA audience, a woman got up and said, what mother in their right mind would allow their child to transition at 11? And I said, I don't know, I'm not a mom. But since then, and it's been almost 20 years, I've seen, well, I've certainly had people come to me and say, I have a transgender child. How do I proceed here? Uh, you know, how do I advocate for my child? Which is one of the most joyful things that I can hear from somebody is how do I advocate for my transgender child? You know, the resonance that a process for a single choice and act, if you can collectively call that an act, because coming out is an ongoing process. This conversation is part of advancing coming out, the act of liberation, which revolutionizes your community, your family, um, maybe the world. It's always been these ambitions that they be absolutely as widespread as possible. So that has to be for me, I guess. I used to think it was International Bridges to Justice, that I was part of being a part of an international human rights campaign. And it has been an honor to do that. But on a professional level, it, it is rivaled by the individual choice that I made. I feel like, whatever, because collective action matters. Doing things with organizations, doing them with others matters. Uh, Inspiring them to move forward with respect to these issues that matter towards our ideals, um, seems to me that's worthwhile. Um, so I look at these things, and yeah, honestly, I'm an organizer. I've always been that way. I've always organized where I am. So being around lawyers and organizing lawyers, and and being a part of the women's movement, from inside the movement, inside the progressive movement, inside the civil rights movement, going from a position of an ally who's really just a trans woman in stealth, essentially, really looking out for herself. Actually, every time she jumps up and starts advocating. Um, so that I have to count as an important achievement. So I'll answer the question with that. Now, I feel like, but it has given me a unique insight from having spent 20 plus years in the profession as a male first, granted an Asian American, specifically Japanese American lawyer in the profession, but seeing it from a male perspective, regardless of the issue of race, which is not an insignificant issue, but gender for me has always been the most definitive issue. And so I've always had a focus upon it. And I guess I'm reporting upon it, I hope, from both sides. And I hope I can give both sides a fair hearing, a fair airing of my experience. But we talked earlier about what it was like to come into the profession, to come in to go to law school. And the since I have some time to stretch, let me just tell you about this. This is a true story. Jim Whitta can confirm it. We're looking at the plaque as the UCLA School of Law. And it's got like, you know, number one student in the class, it's all these women. My class, a class of 71, proudly stated 10% women, the highest percentage in the history of any law school in America, 10%. And yet, they're on the number one student plaque. And, you know, I can speak frankly here. That's, I, I said at the time, I said, you know, this reminds me a lot about Black people going into sports. I said, you know, Jackie Robinson and going into the national. As soon as they start letting women in this place, they're going to dominate. It's just going to happen because they're already academically superior. Number one person in my class in that little 10% was a woman. um, and that perspective, realizing that this tiny percentage was going to make this big difference, was something I felt like I saw a long time before. I remember being very glad about it and feeling like, you know, that's like a glimmer of hope for a community that has no expectations, sort of generally for themselves, about being in those places. So I always felt that was that was an experience in law school and a revelation in a source of hope, just for myself personally and for our community, just generally. You know, what's interesting is Walala, right? I was going to be the first guy to ever get an award from Women Lawyers of Los Angeles, Women Lawyers Association. And I remember telling them, I said, listen, we want to make you the first male that's ever gotten an award from Women Lawyers. I said, I refuse. I said, I'm not going to have 25,000 women saying, what are you doing giving this award that's supposed to go to a woman to this guy? You know, they made me do it anyway. They said that, you know, you can go ahead and refuse. We're still going to give it to you. So I have a long history with the women lawyers, and so I've always been a feminist. I claim that, you know, if there are any people that want to oppose that notion, so I've always been on that side. And so I've seen the struggle from not just years of experience, but from an individual, unique perspective, it seems to me. So um, yes, that was law school. First Asian American in the Asian Pacific and Islander Law Students Association. Joyce Yoshioka, great public defender, the late, great Joyce Yoshioka. Very first one, but she was a great one. And she died really young, but a great lawyer. They have awards named after her. There's all kinds of stuff. But in any event, the law student experience that was so exclusionary towards women and the sense of entitlement that I first learned from the whole male establishment and the whole good old boys that starts right there in law school is stoked and encouraged by the way mentors operate, the way clerks are hired, even in the law school, because I never saw any of that judicial stuff, you know. It demonstrates the preference that people have for people that are like them. And that is a source of it. And it can't be all of it. You know, we know that much. But I get to witness it. I get to witness it from that side, from the sense of male advantage. Coming out of law school, I first worked at Legal Aid, and then I worked at the public defenders. And it was really interesting because I give a really rowdy, typical, you know, kind of outspoken interview with respect to the people that are interviewing me. And I had a veterans preference, though. I had a 10-point veterans preference. So even though I was like lambasting the district attorney who was interviewing me, the public defender, of course, was completely amused by this whole encounter. But in most instances, I never would have got that job because they could have been blackballed by the other interviewer. But I had a 10-point veterans preference. And at that time, come on, there was mostly males in the Army. And so it's an advantage that's given pretty much primarily to males. I got the job because I had the veterans preference. So that starts right there. That's my start with the public defender's office. And even though I'm hired and known as the guy with the longest hair in the history of the public defender's office, and also being one of the very few Asians. So, you know, I couldn't be indulgent on the job. I had to be a great lawyer. It's just that simple. When you're one of the first ones, you better get out there and really forge a path for people, really make some noise. The great thing we have always is this, between you and me, is we can always do great work. We can always do excellent work. We can always go that extra mile with the research, with the argument, with the things that we can do to advance a cause. And that we're so privileged and lucky and I'm grateful to be in that spot. So um, I do feel like this oral history, everything that we're doing here is about advancing others, advancing our cause by shining a spotlight on the way it used to be, I guess. The one thing I've got over all of y'all is kind of really old. I got to witness some ancient history. I got to hear these guys talk before they had a human relations department. you know, there were judges that should have been fired, and some were actually. I remember there was a judge when I was starting up by the name of Leland Geiler. And they actually had a judicial performance commission back and then. I guess it's still around, but he had to get reported for chasing his clerk around with a dildo. That was one of the exhibits in the cases that he prosecuted. And he was this guy that, I mean, they prosecuted pornography back then pretty aggressively. And what he did was at lunchtime, he would film for the benefit of his friends and these films it was like, that he's going to go and sentence somebody to jail for. I mean, it was an interesting male-dominated profession in the trial courts, DAs, PDs, most of them. And again, that 10% number doesn't represent very much of a workforce that's available to these agencies. But I will say this, both offices were pretty good about hiring women. They weren't very good about treating women or promoting women, but they would put pretty good numbers up, at least for anybody who was interested. So I
Yeah.
saw the hiring. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to ask, over time, since you've had this vantage point, do you think that there are still challenges and obstacles facing women in the legal profession today? Because we've come a long way.
Yeah, but there's a ton of, it's very true. But I think if you look at it in terms of the workforce, and it's mostly, it's not at the top, the very top. Those spots are still occupied almost by hereditary right by old white guys and some women. In the nature of things, the overlay of the profession is no different from those of society, which it's got a white supremacist history. I'll say it because I'm the kind of person that says things like that. And I think that it's reflected in the way that people are treated. And I think it's also part of the patriarchy, which is another part of what is ingrained and institutionalized in the sense that people are given preferences. And I saw it all over the place in terms of male preferences, and I still see it today. So, we're talking about, there's quite a big way to go. I think the defeat of Hillary Clinton, I frankly lay that upon sexist, misogynist. A woman is easier to attack than a male because they don't look as good when they fight back. And I think politically, this plays itself out inside of the courtroom as well, or the boardrooms or other places. I know it plays out, I think, in the courtroom, where I think people don't want to share their vulnerability. And I don't blame them. It's scary. But let me put it this way. One of the greatest public defender, women public defender that I worked with was Leslie Abramson. Leslie was, you're probably familiar with her work, but she was more aggressive than anybody else, period, male or female. And it was almost like you had to go to that length to become great at the work, to be so severely aggressive and abrasive on occasion in order to succeed, that you would have to adopt what are traditionally male attributes. So in the office, when I worked together with her, and she was a mentor of mine, and I'm proud of that. I think I'm a better lawyer because she took the time to try to help me. There was such a history of sexism, and I think it existed in every government office that existed in 1974 when I joined the public defender's office. And that is a culture which is like a giant iceberg, which I see moving. I guess it's a form of political climate change. The icebergs are melting and people are no longer proud of being racist, proud of being sexist, proud of being uh, homophobic. These were things that people were proud of in 1974, all over the criminal justice system.
Ms.
And
Yamamoto, I want to bring up something you just brought up about Leslie Abramson. I'm so glad you raised that because one of my questions is in terms of mentors that you've had. And it's interesting that when you started out your career, you had a female attorney as a mentor. Could you talk more about that?
well, she was the type of person that took people under her wing. She was like that. She was known as the most fierce and furious advocate that we had in the public defender's office. But she was also smart, resourceful, highly well prepared, um, and had a chip on her shoulder a mile wide. And I think she recognized that we both had that. You know, so I'm an Asian American lawyer. I'm trying to prove myself. I feel very strongly that's what I've got to do here. And I think both of us had sort of a fire for that. And hers was really to advance the cause of women lawyers. That she wanted to make sure, and she always surrounded herself with really great women lawyers from the office. And I don't know what she saw in me. Maybe she saw that I was actually a sister. Uh, Maybe that's what it was. But I remember her just picking me out and kind of, helping me along. And I had male mentors too. But but I think if you've been around the criminal justice system and you don't know who she is, you must be a blind, deaf and dumb, because she really left a legacy of great work in her wake, I should say. So I mean, yeah, I mean, it was, there's still that level of striving. That iceberg's still there. I mean, you can, in terms of male preference, in terms of patriarchy, there's, it's undoubtedly there. There's too much evidence of it. And I've lived too much years or too many years to ignore the phenomenon. So it is, I think, declining. I hope that this conversation contributes to its decline. Um, and, equity is, boy, that's a really blurry subject. And I'm no expert on that. I really am not. We try to do the best we can for each other. Um, but I can, I've lived my life with the rights of women and been vividly aware of it, how my sister was treated differently from me and how her rights seemed to me, just growing up, to be somehow diminished in light of a sort of male hegemony, which was the rule and was just something you accepted. It wasn't something that you questioned at all. It was as far as your parents were concerned, your religion was concerned, there were some things that you don't question. And that was one of them.
What what if you are a new woman, new female attorney or a woman of color starting in the profession? You have this iceberg that still exists. What advice or suggestions do you have for someone starting?
I almost hate to say this because I think it puts a burden on us that's really unwarranted, but you got to be better lawyers than them. You got to be better lawyers than your opponent. You got to be better lawyers than the judge. And I think, it's like that same chip on your shoulder sometimes for those of us that it works for us. That's not a bad thing to have. Um, so I feel like that aspiration will drive you. You may not succeed, but I always feel like this is your law practice, and you're always trying to get better at it. And what better challenge do you have than to challenge the patriarchy, to really literally outwork them? That was always my mantra. Nobody's going to outwork me. Nobody's going to outwork me. I'm going to lose. I'm a public defender. I'm going to lose some of my cases, maybe a lot of them. But nobody's going to outprepare me. Nobody's going to outwork me. That was always the mantra. And I always felt like it'll hold us in good stead because women lawyers are doing great. We're doing great in the courtrooms. We're doing great writing contracts. We're writing articles. We're writing arguments, coming up, and they're out there. We are out there. It's just that sometimes it's generational change. I've seen it change from 1974. That's a long time ago. I'm going on 50 years out of law school. And I've witnessed this history, and I'm proud of the profession. I think, it's interesting. My dad, right, was a Japanese American, practiced in the segregated bar his whole career, lived and died in the segregated bar of Los Angeles. And I remember him telling me, well, not telling me because he hardly ever spoke to me, but my mom said that he hated the LA County bar because it was exclusionary, because it was white only. And he lived and died with that. I remember her telling me, he says, they're going to give you some kind of award. Your dad's turning over in his grave. He did not like those folks. So, I mean, exclusion is something that we've lived with, and sort of the preferential treatment of others not based upon merit is something that we live with. It's something, again, that we have in common. We bear witness to it, and that's the most important part of it. The data does speak for itself. History does speak for itself. I have seen that there's a level of male impunity that women never see, that only the boys, when they talk to each other about impunity, feel like they can trust another male. Because if they told any woman at all, she would squeal on them.
Well, that brings me to my next question, because you've described being an ally for women and a feminist all your life. But have you ever seen, or do you believe that women have an obligation or a duty to help each other? And have you seen instances where women seem particularly harsh to one another and may not be allies for one another?
Well, the latter, fortunately, is not the majority of women in my experience. There are people that are threatened by the ascendancy of women, feeling like there's only so many spots for us, so to speak, I guess. And I do see that, but maybe it's just I have seen it. People just sometimes take a personal dislike to somebody, and for whatever reason, and they will tend to do things like that. It really normally comes, I think, from a form of insecurity. Let's be honest. No, people that are secure in themselves, they don't do things like that. They really do not. So I mean, it is like that deficiency that people have that to tend to want to elevate themselves by diminishing somebody else, another woman especially. They used to call it in the old days of the profession, when you could say something like that, they used to call that the only Jew in the club syndrome, that you couldn't let another one in because then you weren't special anymore. That I think that may happen in places where, for instance, the supervisory jobs are up for grabs. And who is going to get them? How will they handle that job? How they will handle me and others? Those kinds of issues will come up, I think, and then people start getting, I think, into competition with each other. In the trial courts, what I've seen is people helping each other. I think, across the board, DAs help each other, PDs and private attorneys help each other, and th- most people are not that kind of competitive. Let's put it that way. There are egos galore in the work, and I got one too. But it's some of them are more vividly displayed for others to sort of witness. And yes, I have seen people go to certain sort of unpleasant extremes with that. But I I always try to be positive. What I do is I look at people and I always just try to believe that they want to help. They want to be gracious. They want to be giving, um, and want to be kind. And if they can find that within themselves, they got something to give. Is the way I look at it. So um, there's some curmudgeonly people out there in our profession, and they're not all men.
Well, on that optimistic note, part of this project is to have a call to action. So what words of wisdom do you have for both women and then also for men who are watching this video to foster that culture of civility that we're striving for?
Yeah, civility is one of the best things about the practice of law. When you achieve it, even fighting over momentous issues, life and death, and still find the decency to treat each other with civility is one of the ideals I hold about the profession, about the courts, about the bar associations, that we can hold on to that one piece of tradition that is worthy of preservation. Then our civility towards each other, our ability to keep from harming each other, because words hurt. And what's happening in courthouses all over the place hurts. There's pain there, and the obliviousness, which looks certainly to the public like ruthlessness, is is something that is unbecoming, regardless of gender, regardless of your position, whether you're fighting for the government or for whatever. Um, we won't get what we want out of this life and this work without civility. It will, you know, it's like we don't need another pain in the ass. We what we need is people that can say, look, here's what's here's what you're disagreeing on. The rest of the stuff, you don't need to go after that. It's like and, you know, I was in a band. I was just talking to my wife about that for 35, you know, almost how many years. And I was the mediator, you know, when the drummer hated the lead guitar player, you know, over the years, you got to put people together. And so as an organizer, I always had to harmonize people somehow. I had to find us, find some unity and some solidarity, which is still my message. Found that there is power and there is good in solidarity and unity and all those organizations you talked about. I started them with the idea of getting us all together to do some good out there. You know, that was always the idea. But man, there's a lot of diversity out there, point of view, and you know, it's like.
And if I recall, the band that you speak of, I didn't mention the bio, but I happen to know it consisted of both district attorney personnel and public defender personnel.
That's true, actually. And the DA became a judge while we were still performing. Yeah, that was the most fun we've ever had. It was like the music was already there. The music is a good thing for anybody. I recommend somebody find some art like that art you got behind you. You know, do something that releases the rage and the heartbreak of the work. Um, we have a left and right brain. But in any event, I will say this, just for the record, playing in the band was the greatest time of my life. I have to say, and I recommend it to everyone out there. Get yourself a rock and roll band. You know, get out and play the streets for 35 years. You'll learn the songs by the time you've played all that many years. You'll learn to be a pretty good musician because you've been practicing all the time. It's interesting that for me, anyways, when they came to me to sing lead for this band, I kept thinking, lead singer? I come on, you know, I can't do that. I'm a little folk music singer. Getting out in front of audiences, and I'd walk in there and feel like, oh my God, I hope they like us. Don't throw us out of here, please. And have everybody kind of like loving you. You know, it's like, wow. After about 10 or 15 years, I started getting confident. I would walk in there and I think, pretty soon you're all going to be smiling, and then you're going to be dancing, and then you're going to want to take me home with you. So being in the band, that was the greatest experience. I mean, having an audience respond to you like that, that's like pretty amazing, I think. So I recommend it highly.
Well, you know, tying that into the experiences of being a female attorney, I know from my years in the profession that sometimes there's pressure on women to socialize with the attorneys so that you can foster that networking and those good experiences. Do you think that that's an aspect that has held women back to some degree?
Well, I think it does, because most of the networking opportunities are male dominated. And like conversations and groups have a tendency in the dynamics to not assign as much space, as much airspace in terms of the conversations to women, especially young women. So I think it's a hard place to come from. Some bombastic guy, no matter how young, with a booming voice and a big presence, comes in and dominates. It's harder for women that I know anyway. And who the hell wants to look like that as a woman? So that people attract attention over various things. I think that let's put it this way: if you're looking for some networking avenue towards elevation or some kind of an entree into some place, then you got to be very specific about that. And I think that you have to kind of work it. But most of the time, for me, I look for people that are kindred spirits. You know, I'm always thinking about who's gonna change the world here. You know what I mean? And who cares about changing the world? Who cares about, you know, will I give some part of my life, my soul, to human rights? You know, for fighting against anti-blackness, or there's so many things that could just, lift me right out of my chair. And I just think that if you can fall in love with a cause, you can find your way to your kindred spirits. Let me put it to you that way. The human rights people, the people that are really concerned about this, kind of find their way to each other through mutual friends, through the right job, I think, doing the work that fulfills you and helps you to grow. That that's let's put it this way. I think that's available, but you don't look in the wrong places. Is all I'm thinking. You know what I mean? There are certain avenues of approach and attack. If you're strategizing your career around networking, then you got to be really specific. It seems to me you can't just randomly come by and, oh, here's Mia. Hey, what's up? Let's talk about rock and roll.
Ms. Yamamoto, what role do organizations such as LACBA, Walala, how do they play a role in terms of elevating women and persons of color in the legal profession?
Well, LACBA in particular, as you know, has a history. They didn't desegregate until 1961. They brought in the John M. Langston Bar Association, which is the black bar, and they broke them. They made them an affiliate, which officially broke the color barrier. My dad died in '57, but let me just say this: that we're all in this together. Is the way I've always looked at it, or I tried to look at it. And I've always felt like what small thing we do sometimes in one place can have great resonance, and sometimes worldwide resonance. So the LACBA, because it's a what do you want to call it, overarching organization over the Los Angeles County commercial and every other aspect really of the profession. I like the fact that you have a voice and it's participatory. I was on the board, and it's interesting. I love that experience. I love being on that, even though I ran for the board on the no justice, no peace um, platform. I didn't think anybody would vote for me, but I got on basically saying that the lawyers should be out there in the streets, protesting with the people that got no justice. And I still got on the board. So I was able to say outrageous things, to people, you know, and I like that. I have to say, and because people, it's great. You can define where you're coming from, and the I think they found it amusing. So it was like, let's put it that way. But I remember when Jerry Chaliff was president, he put me on a judicial nominations committee, things like that. I mean, you get to actually make policy. That, it seems to me, is pretty important actually, because all of us now are affected by the policy. So LACBA, they're really interesting, by the way. LACBA gave me the Defense Attorney of the Year award a few years back, and I remember that. So the Japanese language paper says Mia Yamamoto is the DA of the year. Of course, all my friends are calling me and ridiculing me, but yeah, I mean, I think let me just say this: I got that award. Actually, I remember calling out the governor, so I can say this on right here on the program that I got up there, got the award, and I said that, thank you for the award, all that sort of stuff. I said, I just want to say one thing about the death penalty. And I saw Governor Duke Majan over there, who was actually a proponent of the death penalty, rose to the governorship through his advocacy for the death penalty. And I looked over at him and I said, I know it was your pet project and all, but it's really hurting us. And I wanted to take off things, how much it's costing, the human cost, and the audience erupted. They just started jumping out of their seats, cheering. I couldn't finish the speech. I just thanked everybody and sat down. But people came up to say, you just called out the governor, And I never really thought about it at the time, but when I did reflect back upon it, really, I got so much love from just saying that, telling I was going to go through a whole lecture on, you brought this death penalty on us, and this is really wrong. And I couldn't, and maybe it was good that it happened like that. I just went down a roar of applause and went to go sit down. Um, I'm able to advocate for things. I advocated against the death penalty the whole time I was with LACBA. Never got anybody to agree with me taking a position against. And I remember that was the one thing that really kind of disillusioned me, because I thought, we can take this organization to a humanist place. Why do we have to continue to sort of defend the status quo? And that was always my fight. I remember some folks from, there's a right-wing Pacific Legal Foundation who sort of, I think they fancy themselves the ACLU of the right. And they came in with some issue, and I got up and said, hey, why is it that you only come in here advocating for white people? And the whole place was like, but it was, and the guy gave me the most hostile look, which was great. You know what I mean? He understood what I was asking. You know what I mean? I'm just asking you guys. You come in here, and that's all you ever ask for. Why is that? In any event, so LACBA was fun. I enjoyed that process. I was one of the people that stood up for Joyce Carlin when we went through the case, the Latasha Harlan's killing by Sun Jadu. I did stand up for, and right in that board meeting, I said, look, you're going after a woman, and that's an easy target in this day and age. And I remember thinking that we're always easy targets. And that goes back to a lot of the outrageous things I did at the county bar. So I really love the county bar. I'm still a dues paying member. I'm a criminal justice section. I appreciate my membership. I absolutely congratulate the bar for doing this project, for caring enough to do an oral history project so that I can complain.
Well, thank you, Ms. Yamamoto. Any other parting words of wisdom? It's been such a pleasure to talk to you and hear your vantage point. And I know that you are so inspiring to so many of us in the legal profession. Any final words for our audience?
Words. I like to close the talks that I have sometimes with certain things that I think about. One of them was Toni Morrison. If you achieve freedom for yourself, it is meaningless unless you seek freedom for others. And this work that we do, this service that we do, we have to, the late Susan Kwan used to say, you got to lift while you climb. And that, I believe, applies to us. Believe me, the institutional forces that are in place are not assisting women in this profession. We do have to help each other because nobody else is doing it. I know that you got to inspire the guys to take up that flag, and with all allies, we have to convince them of the justice in our cause so that they will march with us, they will vote with us, and that they will join with us. That is what I want to leave you with, that we do need each other. We do not owe anything to each other, but we owe it to ourselves to reach out and be there for others.
Thank you. That was beautiful. On behalf of the PAC Subcommittee on Gender Bias and Civility, thank you so much, Ms. Yamamoto, for talking to us about gender equity and civility. And I just really appreciate your time today. And thank you to everyone listening today. And we look forward to seeing you on our next installment.
Hopefully, yeah. Take care. Thank you.